Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are doing something a little bit different. We're going to decode an ancient, monumental concept, the nature of faith. But we're going to do it by examining the biblical figure of Abraham through a very modern lens. We're basically going to look at his journey as the ultimate modern-day contract. If you've ever wondered how faith practically operates, how to actually secure the promises you read about, and what the literal terms and conditions are, well, you're in exactly the right place.
Okay, so here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the ultimate contract, look at how faith actually works hard and how obedience opens the door. Then we'll cover defying impossible odds, patience and absolute certainty, and finally, claiming your inheritance. Let's get right into it.
To establish the foundational terms of this agreement, let's start with Section 1, the ultimate contract. Our source text explicitly defines the biblical word covenant in a way that makes total sense for us today. It is a contract, a legally binding agreement. In this framework, the text essentially positions God as the ultimate CEO who actively sought out a guy named Abraham. And the terms of this contract? They were straightforward but massive. God promised that if Abraham and his descendants would obey and serve him, God would abundantly bless them. Now, this wasn't just some casual off-the-cuff promise. The text depicts God looking for a real partner, someone he could deeply trust. It was such an intimate partnership that the narrative actually notes God wouldn't even make major executive decisions, like, say, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, without consulting his friend Abraham first. How crazy is that?
And Romans 4:3 brilliantly illustrates exactly how this contract was signed. It tells us that Abraham simply believed God. He didn't sign this contract by following a bunch of rules or through the law, because, historically speaking, the law didn't even show up until 430 years later. So Abraham becomes the primary signatory, securing a literal inheritance of the world strictly through the currency of faith. Faith was quite literally his signature on the dotted line.
Moving right along to Section 2, faith actually works hard.
So, what does that signature actually entail? We really need to tackle a massive modern misconception here. A lot of folks today think living by faith means, you just quit your job, kick back on the couch, and wait for miracles to drop from the sky. The source text absolutely dismantles this idea. It points out that living by faith doesn't mean you quit your job. Heck, you could have 12 jobs, as long as you don't make those jobs your ultimate source of security. Galatians 5:6 literally says, "Faith worketh." The text even reminds us that Jesus was an incredibly hard worker, stating, "My Father worketh hitherto, and I work." So the reality. When you are operating under this faith contract, you aren't some spiritual sluggard. You are actively, energetically working.
Which brings us to Section 3, obedience opens the door. So if faith is an active pursuit, what's the specific action that triggers the benefits? The text argues a very crucial point. While faith is absolutely necessary to please God, it's the ink on the contract. Active obedience is the literal key that unlocks the door to the miraculous. You can have all the faith in the world, but faith without corresponding action is just a dead end. If you want the prosperity and the blessings outlined in the agreement, obedience is presented as the non-negotiable mechanism that opens the door.
We see this perfectly in Hebrews 11:8. Abraham didn't just passively believe God while sitting comfortably in his living room. When he was called to go out to an unknown place, he obeyed. Let's put this in modern terms for a second. He didn't have a GPS on his phone, he didn't have a Zillow listing of his future inheritance, and he definitely didn't have absolute proof or Yelp reviews from people who had done it before. He physically packed up his entire life and moved simply because his CEO told him to. That, right there, is the gold standard of contractual obedience.
But let's be real. Section 4, defying impossible odds.
Executing that kind of blind obedience is incredibly difficult when the odds are stacked completely against you. The source text uses a fantastic modern analogy to explain how faith operates against impossibilities. Scientifically speaking, according to the strict laws of aerodynamics, it is completely impossible for a bumblebee to fly. Its body is just way too big and too heavy for its tiny little wingspan. Any scientist looking at the raw data would conclude that the bumblebee is grounded forever.
But here is the absolute best part. The bumblebee doesn't know that. Bumblebees do not read scientific journals. The author uses this to brilliantly illustrate what the life of faith is all about. When the world looks at a situation and says, "Nope, that can't be done," the believer, operating under this contract, doesn't read the journals of impossibility. They just keep flying.
Flying in the face of impossibility requires a remarkably strong mindset, leading us to Section 5,
patience, and absolute certainty.
According to Hebrews 6:12, the formula for actually receiving the payout of this contract has 3 specific steps. Step 1 is faith. Easy enough. But step 2 is where most people totally fail. Patience. The text explicitly warns against growing disinterested or lazy. You have got to combine your faith with the sheer stamina of patience to finally reach step 3 and inherit the promises. As the source notes, in due season we shall reap, if we faint not.
Let's bust another major myth while we're at it. A lot of people assume living by faith means stumbling around in the dark, constantly feeling insecure about what's going to happen next. The text completely refutes this. The truth is, walking by faith means you are walking in the light. It means you are absolutely confident. You might not know exactly how God is going to fulfill His word, and the author rightly points out that trying to figure out the how isn't even in our job description anyway, but you know with absolute certainty that He will.
And why can you be so certain? Just look at this quote from Hebrews 6. When God made this contract with Abraham, He swore by Himself, saying, "Surely blessing, I will bless thee." The word surely is absolutely key there. The author argues that a believer doesn't need to anxiously wait around for the other shoe to drop. According to this framework, if the contract says you are blessed, period. God's word is presented as the ultimate ironclad guarantee. All we have to do is confidently follow the steps in obedience.
And that brings us to our final section, Section 6, Claiming Your Inheritance. Let's see how all this builds to the ultimate payout of our contract. The text asserts a massive, frankly, life-altering claim for modern believers. Galatians tells us that if you belong to Christ, you are legally Abraham's seed. Think about what that means. Every single blessing promised in that original contract with Abraham legally belongs to you today. You are a direct heir according to the promise. When Jesus came, He didn't cancel the old contract, He actually enlarged upon it. Those ancient blessings are fully operational right now. And just like Abraham obtained the promise after patient endurance, that exact same mechanism is available to you today.
So, the author brings us to this direct, highly provocative question. Do you want to obtain the promise? Seriously, do you want to step into that favored position, experience that level of intimacy, and cash in on the ultimate contract?
If your answer is yes, then the instruction from the text is simple but profound. You have to take action. You have to walk in the steps of the faith of our father Abraham. You sign with faith, you unlock the door with hardworking obedience, you ignore the journals of impossibility just like a bumblebee, and you wait with absolute, patient certainty. So as we wrap up this explainer, the source material leaves us with this final thought to chew on. If the contract is signed, if the inheritance is legally established, and the door is waiting right there in front of you, will you take that first step of obedience today to claim what the text says is rightfully yours?